Magic.
Want to see a magic trick? Good. Abracadabra!
Magic is a complicated thing. It's different in all sorts of media, and present in all sorts of media as well. Harry Potter, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Shakespeare plays, Greek mythology, Dungeons and Dragons, Full Metal Alchemist, My Little Pony. Friendship is a form of magic. Even so, almost none of them bear resemblance to one another. They all have different systems, sources, and ways to funnel and use their magic. One might even derive their power from an oath or a promise. Some other media might claim it comes directly from inside of you, or even from the earth itself. Heartstrings also has its own magic system as well, and a rather complex one at that. It's even presented in a way in the form of the animations and gameplay that you can see in the cinematic universe of Heartstrings, and in almost small, unnoticeable ways. Though I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's first establish how the magic is sourced and funneled into these Arcadians. There are 4 separate ways to source your magic in Arcadia. First comes from the earth and the nature. Nature is a very raw and chaotic force, and it takes practice to be able to tap into the elements of nature and control and twist them into your very bidding and soul. With charisma, one can shift the very earth, move the tides, force the growth of plants, and become one with the environment until you are on par with the forces that govern nature itself. One can learn to manipulate and cheat their way into the laws of nature. Sages use this type of magic, since they are completely incapable of pulling it from the heart. Another and more common way to pull magic is from oneself, though this can have disastrous effects on the body in the long term. If there's no source you can pull from, you can tug at your own heartstrings and force the energy that keeps you alive to take shape, and that can be in whatever form the practitioner wishes. This type of magic can be highly stressful, painful, and uncomfortable. It's possible to break bones from this practice if one pushes themselves too far. You can become sick, anemic, frail. It can even be fatal if you're not careful. Thankfully, that practice is few and far in between. The absolute most common form of magic is to be pulled directly from the heart itself, thanks to its widespread power and influence. Someone can pull directly from the heart's magic, lingering in the air, and form it into whatever they wish. Of course, this still requires practice and dedication, but it is possible to master this. It can be a wild and chaotic form of magic if you're simply tapping into it without much refinement or practice. It's like a garden hose. Anyone can pick it up, but you need to be able to change it to the setting that you want. If you don't know how, it's going to be a totally random spray that you can't really control. At least, not until you know how to change the settings. The final and most forbidden form of all types is to directly pull power from a demon or a divine. This is because these can quickly become parasitic relationships between that being and the mortal. When the being funnels power to the mortal, it creates a bond that is not easily severed. Something that can very easily and quickly rot away at the mind of the mortal. With demons and divines truly being eldritch beasts in the outer planes beyond our comprehension, especially with pacts with the demons, the mortal can also become a threat to society as the Arcadians know it. The demon can force the mortal to enact dark favors or harm other people. It's also one of the laziest forms of magic, as the user does not need to take effort to pull it from themselves or anything at all. Instead, it is being given to them. But due to the unreliability of the divines and demons, it's risky and life-threatening, not only to themselves, but to the people around them as well. What all of these types have in common is that magic comes from willpower and intention. One needs to understand the power of intention and self-determination, to understand what it is that you desire, to know what you want, to know who you yourself are, and to bank on that. The unfortunate part is having to see the darker sides of yourself to tap into any magic source and to face your darkest reflections. Confidence is key, and to know who you are on an intrinsic and intimate level. To not understand yourself is to never understand the magic that you hold. Then there is ritual circles. They're also simply called circles. These can be drawn by anyone and activated by all magic sources, but they are very sensitive and can be prone to failing if even the simplest instruction isn't followed perfectly. Circles can cause all sorts of triggers and a massive range of effects, from long-range teleportation to healing, and one of the most often used, summoning otherworldly beings. These beings most often are known as demons and divines, though they may be a little bit different from what you are familiar with in popular media. We will be discussing demons and divines at a later time. Interestingly, sages and untethered are completely unable to pull magic from the heart. They are required to either tap it from themselves or from nature. This is due to it either being an active choice not to rely on the heart, or simply because they were born with the phenomenon of being untethered. Being untethered after generations of attachment to the heart is incredibly rare, but there is the implication that it is genetic to some degree, as Wiccan, his daughter, and his mother are all unaffected by the heart's disappearance. There is also the concept that it could be completely a recessive gene, as despite Magpie having anemia as a mother as well, he is still affected heavily by the heart dying over time. Circles take longer to prep and execute properly, but it is the most accessible and best controlled form of magic for the uninitiated. The more powerful a being, the more draining it can be to summon them. The most common way to use circles is actually for the purpose of reproduction. It's one of the more simple rituals, requiring for at least 2 different people with consenting ideals to bring forth a new life into the world. At that point, they would draw their ritual circle and take off a physical part of themselves, usually a chip off of their form. It would go into the circle, followed by long mantras and oaths being made to ensure the safety and the care for the child. After the ritual is complete, the child will be formed in the circle, and life will be breathed into it through the magic of a promise and intention. They would take on the feature of both of their parents and coming into the world not as a baby, but physically and mentally more so along the lines of a toddler. Their biological gender is determined completely randomly. There are more rituals and circles that can be done to change the gender of someone if they are unhappy what has been given to them. All couples, regardless of gender, are able to perform this ritual together to bring new life into the world. The unfortunate other use of circles that was mentioned earlier is to bring otherworldly forces into the world. Both divines and demons are formed through the deaths of people with incredibly intense forms of intention and determination. I can explain right now how death in the afterlife works in the Heartstrings world. When someone mortal dies, one of 4 things can happen. In the event someone is tethered to the material plane, has unfinished business, or maybe died a particularly horrible death, they will become a ghost that lingers on the material plane, much like the situation with Bite, unless there's a method or a way for them to resolve their unfinished business and they can move on. If they had a well-intentioned soul or life, they might become divine, like an angel, and watch over the mortals in their ethereal realm. There is a whole hierarchy and system in that afterlife that dictates what their rank will be, but that's neither here nor there. If their soul is particularly tainted, commit many evils, and had darkness in their heart, they can be transformed into a demon like Asmodeus. At that point, they are functionally immortal, and they'll be sent to the abyss to regenerate if they are killed. Their time spent there being definitive on how severe their wounds were. Know that demons can also be made through reproduction, such as Magpie's case. If a soul is not tethered, not good nor evil, their spirit will be recycled and reincarnated. This happens repeatedly until they attain either divine or demonic influence. Additionally, most demons in the Arcadia area usually require a specific circle that can be usually found in a book somewhere, since the sages keep records of all known Arcadian demons and divines. The circle is drawn and often look like alchemical circles. You know, like the big pretty fancy ones that you can see in animes like Fullmetal Alchemist. This is where it gets unique. Each demon requires different materials to be summoned. Demons can pick and choose what these things are. They are normally symbolically important to them, or it could just be something that they enjoy. Demons are made one of two ways usually. The first, like Magpie's case, being born and inherited this demonic influence from somewhere in their family line or even their parents. Or they are people who have died with incredibly grievous sins, such as Asmodeus' unrequited and maddened lust, or Cygnus' unending hatred and gluttony. But not all demons are bad. Most can be awful, but there is the rare good demon that has reformed themselves after death and dedicated themselves to helping the mortals instead of harming them. But those are few and far in between. There are a few ways to avoid death as well, all of which requiring some form of magic. In the event you're on the brink of death, and you have gained the favor of a demon or a divine, but let's face it, more likely a demon, you may be brought back to the mortal realm at the cost of something. There's also necromancy. In that case, the soul might just be yoinked from wherever they are and stuffed right back into their original body. But that doesn't really wholly bring them back, depending on where their soul is or was. If it's a demon, there's simply no way to use necromancy to bring them back. If it's a ghost, they can come back relatively unchanged. If it's a divine or reincarnated, then they'll act more like a zombie. Reincarnated because there's nothing to pull back. Their spirit is already somewhere else. If it's divine, it's because their mind have already been rotted by the eldritch, biblically accurate garbage that they've seen on the ethereal plane, and then being suddenly stuffed back into a mortal body would really melt your brain, much like Ophelia's case. Almost all demons have shadowy forms, and their magic will reflect what their gravest sin was that caused them to become a demon. Asmodeus has shadow magic, indicative of the fact that he lived his life in the shadows, lusting after someone he couldn't have and never leaving his comfort zone. He lurked in the darkness when he murdered the king's wife, and when he stayed in the shadows when he confessed his love. His heart is veiled in the evil, selfish, dark thoughts, and that is what formed him to who he is now. Cygnus is a being more of gluttony and hatred. They hate everything out there. They only ever feel hunger coursing inside of them. This manifested as being able to change into whatever shape they need in order to feed off of someone's fear. Their hunger is eternal, but Cygnus has grown to love it. Interestingly, almost like all demons regardless, their true form is still a shadowy puddle with a few too many eyes. It's also to note that all demons and divines alike share one thing in common: a true eldritch form incomprehensible to the mortal eye. Monsters that live beyond our minds, whether or not they lived a life full of virtue or of vitriol. Their forms have come into contact with the ethereal and abyssal planes in which they dwell, things of pure, unadulterated magic and endlessness. This will twist them into what their forms truly are and meant to be, whether that be a puddle of eyes, always searching for their next meal, or a wheel made of halos and wings. Now, moving topics back to the main subject of magic, there are also personalized forms of it. When people pull magic, it intertwines itself with their own soul, mind, and intention. Sorry if I'm using that word a lot, but it really is the best and most accurate term I can pull for all of this. When that happens, it's like baking a cake. The magic provided either by yourself, nature, or the heart are the main ingredients, the ones that you can't go without. But you, yourself, and the parts that make you who you are the main flavorings of the parts that will make the cake into something special. One person may have a tart blueberry soul that manifests most of their magic to look like shards of ice or polygonal laces of frost dripping from their fingertips. Someone else may be incredibly sweet, like a soothing peach. Their magic can swirl and wreathe around them like slow-growing vines, flowing and passionate like water. It's a bit different for everyone, and this especially manifests when it comes to attacks and weapons. Let's look at a few prime examples in the Heartstrings series that we can see in action. Wiccan does not manifest any weapons, but makes up for this by creating powerful bursts of flames and rolling red waves of passion and intense emotion. What vulnerability he does not show on the outside is instead expressed through his potent, destructive magic. The flames scorch and burn with intensity, and his waters roll and break into horrifying tides of overwhelming determination. Wiccan has a terrifying degree of control in his magic, something that is expressed in how he has little to no randomized and chaotic bullets. Everything he uses has a pattern, a smooth and recognizable outline able to be telegraphed. Spectra's royal form is another good example of this. On the flip side, her magic is completely uncontrolled and wild. Her bullets fly everywhere. There aren't many well-concentrated patterns that anyone can telegraph. Her wild and unpracticed suction of the magic around her shows itself as something she cannot control easily. It reflects her mental state, prickly, angry, confused, and all over the place. Magpie and Ophelia have the cases of being able to summon magic, snow-white weapons. Those weapons are the culmination of their personality. Magpie's blades are longswords, elegant and refined, much like the practice of magic. Also being a practiced mage, he has very few bullets. All of his attacks are very controlled, tight, and straightforward. When he does have bullets, it's only because it's the after effects of his wild blue flames. Meanwhile, I can't say much for Ophelia. This is because her level is old and the first one I ever made. And my skill in animation wasn't well refined yet. I wasn't really able to convey this idea of magic through animation. The idea was there, I just wasn't skilled enough to do it yet. Though we can argue that most of her attacks, if not all of them, are very physical, with only the slight augmentation of magic. Her power shows itself as brutish, cutting hand axes that can combine together into one larger weapon. This demonstrates how axes can be used either domestically for housework and woodcutting, but also as a tool for both protection and destruction. Now, there is the question of people who are incredibly potent with their use in magic, and understand it on an intrinsic level. In that case, their form becomes a vessel to house that magic. If a shape has a dark inside with a colored outline, it means there's a massive overflowing of magic. In Pilot's case, it's because there's the influx of energy being provided to him by Asmodeus. With Trip, it's because she has embraced the chaotic nature and chooses not to contain it. Such instances include those two, but this only happens in the events the character cannot control or contain it very well. The overflow is more wild and uncontrolled massive amounts of magic, more than a body can handle, so it affects them physically with the outline. Characters that are more in control of their magic to an intensely precise degree, like Wiccan, don't have the outline. This is a bit off topic, but it is important to bring up the notion that Arcadia is not really quote-unquote behind any other kingdom or nation on technology on the planet of HSO 444. I mean, why develop cell phones when you can simply cast a spell to contact someone long distance? While they may not be technologically on par with nations like Kirkra or Hivewick, they make up for it heavily in the magic department, though there is the matter of why they're so magically advanced. And it's the unfortunate truth of having had the heart for basically everything. Their mental health, physical health, magic, and mental stability. They had a crippling over-reliance on the heart. For each generation, that reliance and dependence grew. Therapy wasn't necessary, let alone be a potential option. If someone was in pain, they just went to the heart and felt better. Though in truth, it only numbed the pain and didn't actually make it go away. When it was yoinked from where it was belonged, everyone just started to fail in every aspect. All the things they relied on the heart for was now beginning to fail. They relied on the heart for literally and basically everything. Think of it like this: the folly and the fall of Atlantis. In the original myth, the people were highly technologically advanced, but because of their reliance on their technology, the gods struck them down for their folly and hubris, and they fell deep into the ocean, or so the myth goes. And considering their over-reliance on the heart for hundreds of generations, they quite literally never developed the tools for otherwise. Everything was so central to it. The concept of therapy and druidic magic that pulled directly from nature would be so alien and foreign to them. Even if the nature magic was something used long ago, the practice was mostly abandoned in favor of using the heart's magic. To these people who lived with the heart doing everything for them through their entire lives, it would seem like madness to these people. Their logic may be flawed, but it's just the way things developed for hundreds upon hundreds of years. Well, I think I should thank you for taking the time to listen to my long and unnecessary lore dump about the heart, demons, divines, and the magic system in Arcadia and Heartstrings. If you're interested in seeing more lore content on my channel, be sure to like and subscribe, and maybe even comment, because YouTube algorithm is an evil beast that hates seeing creators actually thrive. Anyway, have a good night everyone, and I will see you in the next video.